Ready, set, go. Only 8 days left to get Black Friday prices now at Currents BC World. Plus, if our prices go any lower on Black Friday. Plus, if our prices go any lower on Black
Evening all, welcome along, and thanks for all of the recent new subscribers. We've upped quite significantly over the last week or so. I've gone from 250 to 296 subscribers, so we're moving in the right direction. So anyhow, tonight I wanted to mount a shell for my new Xray X12. I've already got myself an AMR mounted, but I want to have a couple of options to fit the two different shells, see what their characteristics are on the X21. I know what they're like on the E3 that I've been running, but I'd like to find out what they're like on the 21 car. Now, I've done a video on mounting a body shell on the channel. I'm sure you've all found it useful. It's one of the most popular videos, but I thought it'd be useful to do another one, do it live as I go. So anyhow, I've started by marking out the body shell. What I've done is I've used a ruler and I've just cut the lip off the shell, so the lip's gone, and so I've marked from the corner all the way down to the line of the front splitter, and I've done it diagonally. The reason for doing this is because we mount the rear wing really quite high on an M20 car, and I think it's when you then mount it that way, you have a massive gap between the bottom edge of the body shell and the floor, which I'm not a massive fan of. So hence why I cut this line. I've done some measurements and worked out the right angles, as it were. Then secondly, what I do is for the front wheels, what I do is I mark the center point. I measure the total width of the front wheel arch, and then draw a line down through the center of the wheel arch, and then that way I can line it up on my car. So then what I'm going to do, I'm then going to cut that out. I always use curved scissors because I think it gives it's a bit more tricky. It actually gives a better finish on the cut personally. So I'm going to work my way around. I had a comment that the audio wasn't too flash on my video, so I had a remote microphone kicking around, so I put that up, and hopefully the audio is a little bit better for you. Always take your time when cutting it out. Important to get a decent line. I think the more that you practice and do it, the better you get at cutting out a shell. Certainly not something that can come quickly and easily. I think, again, like all of these things, just take a little bit more time. Not in no rush to get it done. And it's good to have a line down the shell as well. You could easily cut a angular line from front to back. I don't think that'd be too difficult, but I think you might get some inconsistencies from one side to the other. And like all of these things with the 12 scale cars, you're trying to be as detailed as you possibly can. Certainly something that I've had to work at as I go along. So that's now cut out. I've trimmed around the cut line, and so you can see that that was the original line, and as I say, it's now angular. So at that point, I'm pretty confident that I've got my point that will line up with my front axles. Now, at this point, I'm going to bring my car in. What I should have done, potentially, is taken the wheels off already. It won't take me a second. Happy to field any questions as we go. I'll also talk about setting the right height of the body shell as well, because that's an important component. I think there's nothing worse than when you've got yourself a new shell, you stick it down on on the carpet, you go around the first corner and it's touching the carpet, and you have to put it back in. I know I've been susceptible to that. The reason why I take the wheels off is because I want to be able to see the axles. I don't want to have to guess, and I'll have to put the wheels back on when I then cut the arches out, and you'll understand why. I'm going to do that in a minute. So there the wheels off. Car on the bench there. So I'm going to drop it on the top, and but you want to make sure, obviously the car's already set up. If you use the front edge of your workboard and line your axles up, then you know that your front wheels are straight. Then drop it on. Now the beauty with the M20 shell, which is fantastic, is that they've got some lines which do give you a good orientation, but of course that's pretty much for the E3 and not for the A12. But the axle length is the same as the E3, so that's a benefit. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the front axles to the lines that I've drawn. And what I use is I use a lipo on the front here. So this is a lipo, which then holds the body shell in place. As I say, these may be all things that you know already or done before, but I don't think it harms us to get better at it. We'll pick up new tidbits as we go. Unfortunately, no one taught me how to mount a body shell. It was a bunch of mistakes that I had to make over time. So at this point, I now want to make sure that the front axles are the same distance away from the sides of the body shell. As I'm adjusting that, just going to go back and double check that I haven't then moved the axles on the side. And what you can do is, once you then get this lipo in the right position, in terms of it being away from the front end of the car, you can then drop another body shell in if you want to do 2 or 3 at a time. That way it saves you a bit of hassle. So because this is really useful, that the M20 has got some lines here which are really central, I can then just measure the gap between those lines and the centre of the body posts on the Xray. 6 there. 6 there, so that's square up at the back.
I've got a lot to say. So much that I've been wanting to make a podcast to share my thoughts with the world. Now I can, with Anchor, Spotify's free podcast creation.
Happy with that square at the front. And then at this point I take my Sharpie. Final checks.
Head over to anchor.fm/start your podcast, or download the Anchor app and make your podcast for free.
And this really depends how fussy you want to be. How much you want to line it up and get it all nice and straight. Happy with that. Now I use my Sharpie and go around and just dab a point. So now, reaming the holes. Reaming the holes is something that you, again, like all these things, you need to take your time. Don't want to be taking big chunks out of your body shell. Just ream really slowly so you can get that on the camera there. You see, I'm really reaming slowly. I'm not pushing it in really misses quickly. And if anything, I'd actually rather slightly undercut the hole and a little bit quick and a bit deep there. And then I'm going to do that around all of the holes, because what you want is you want it to slide onto the body posts and not really have too much play, but also make sure that it doesn't snag on it, because you do have the opportunity of tweaking a car if the body shell sits too tight on the body posts. So again, just take your time. People that get body shells pro painted, I've had a few done over the years, and I always send the guy or girl a pre-cut body shell. There's absolutely no way I want to be cutting holes into a 50 quid shell after you've pulled it and paid for it to be painted, and actually risk the chance of it being wrong. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with those holes. They're all looking like they're in the right spot, and they're all sorted. And again, on this reamer, this Huddy reamer, it's actually got the scale. There's some measurements here, which is the size of the hole you cut. So again, you can make sure that all of the holes that you cut in the shell are the same size. I'm cutting it around 6mm. Nothing better than putting on a body shell and it fits nicely. So those holes are pretty much spot on. They're just a fraction too tight, so I'm just going to go really lightly into them. Perfect. So that goes on nicely. Hasn't got any play either. It fits really nicely, and it actually sits perfectly flush on my workboard here. If I maybe hold it up like that, you can see that my ruler here, it sits pretty much dead flush there. So that therefore means that the chassis, when it touches the deck, the body shell is also not going to dig too heavily into the carpet. Now, of course, it doesn't quite work that way. And I always used to think, well, if that chassis sits flat on the worktop, and my body shell will just lays gently on the worktop, the body shell's fine. Doesn't quite work that way. You still need a bit more clearance. That'll still be too low. So that's now fitting nicely on the car. Now it's time to cut the wheel arches, which is always a bit of fun. I absolutely encourage you to get a compass cutter. Do not do it by freehand unless you're a seasoned veteran at cutting a perfectly round circle. I am not, so I use a compass cutter. Blade might not be the sharpest, but it does cut, and if you go enough times, it will store it in the right way. So bolt the wheels back on. Now, depending on the size of tyre that you run, and you want to do it so that you're going to cut the wheel arch the size that you start at in a tyre. So if you're running 41 on the front, 42 on the rear, let's say, then you probably want to give yourself about a mil and a half extra, so that the tyres don't catch. Depending on how accurate you are, you could go less, but to be safe. And another great bit of kit is a Protoform sander for the arches. It's arguably one of the most expensive bits of kit going. This is it here. So this goes onto your Dremel, and then it fits, or it's the same size effectively as a 12 scale wheel. So it works out really nicely. So that's a great bit of kit. So there's the shell. She fits on nicely. What I'm always very fussy on is making sure that particularly the wheel, the rear wheels, I want to make sure that the arch or the wheel isn't pushing through the arch. It's a bit more difficult to line up the back of the car. That's why I take just some extra time. So yes, so now it's time to do the front wheels. I'll tell you what. I was going to plug it in, but I just realised taking all my wires off. Stupid boy. So it's that, you can see that on the camera there. You can see that the line is very close to matching up both sides. So now on the front wheel, I would always sit the car on the deck and just make sure that when you sit it on the deck that the car is not pushing the shell up on the posts. Then I go down to the side and I mark the front with a Sharpie on the axle, again making sure that you have straightened your wheels to start with. Then what I do at the rear is I put spots on the outside of the rear wheel, and I'll show you in a second. I'll hold it up to the camera.
I'm on the line. I will bring honor to us all. Turn that Thursday around with something epic. With Disney's incredible adventure, Mulan.
So there's the dot for the front axle, and then around the rear there are dots at the widest part of the rear tyre. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw around a tyre.
I've been wanting to make a podcast to share my thoughts
That's exactly the same diameter, so I can use that for this purpose.
Anchor's easy-to-use tools are designed for every creator, helping you make unlimited episodes and get them heard
I'm going to use
Turn your ideas into a podcast for
this
everyone
arch here.
Head over to anchor.fm/get started to download the Anchor app and make your own podcast for free.
I'm going to do the same on the other side. So now I've got a couple of wheels cut out on the back of the car. Then I can drop that back down onto the car and just double check everything is lined up. Spot on. So that's done. Now I can bring in my compass cutter. So I will usually run no more than a 41 front. So I'm going to cut 42. And then I can use the camera for this because I'm going to do it in my lap. So now the compass cutter into the hole, and this is all simple stuff really from here on out. If you undercut the side of the wheel arch, at least you can use the rotiform cutter to make the wheel arch a little bit bigger. If you overcut it, and it looks like a monster truck, can't really do much about that. So I'd much rather go slightly too small than too big. So I've scored this about 6 times now. Again, the blade is not great, that's why I'm going a few more times, but I was always keen to go too many times than too few times, because I don't want to make a balls up at this stage when I've done everything really on point. Then you should be able to just crease it, and if you can't, then you need to keep going. The front arches are always thicker than the rear arches in terms of plastic in the Lexan. Give that a small slip. Must get a new cutter. And you can double check that wheel arch so you can see The arch is pretty nifty. Do the same on the other side. First thing in the morning, in fact after this video, I'm going to go and order a new compass cutter because this is disgusting. Get down the arches 2 millimeters forwards. What are you talking about? Explain what you mean, get down the arches. Running them forwards, agreed, gives it more steering, but I've never run the car before. So I'm not going to cut and run a body shell or a car for the first time with a body shell more forwards than standard. I'm going to see what it runs like in the standard position. If I don't like it, then I'll cut a new body shell and move them forwards. But I would never start a brand new car that I've never run before with a body shell forwards. I'd always want to run one standard. So there we go, there's the other side, the other wheel there. Perfect, perfect. So now we need to go a little bit bigger on the rear. Going to go another mil. For this bit, I'm going to use the bench. Because I need to find the centre of the circle. So after I've found the centre of the circle, just by tracing around the outside, do exactly the same dig. Back's always much easier because it's much thinner lexan on the rear. And there's the rear. It's come out pretty cool. And the other side. Use that cut out. we go. Those are the arches done. So there's the back wheel. There's the back wheel done. There's the front wheel done. Now, the arches are a little bit close to the ground, admittedly, and so when I put that down to the ground here, the body shell is touching the ground. So at this point, I can then lift the body shell up to the desired height, or if there's a little bit of wriggle room of trimming the bottom of the shell, she's done and ready. But what that does with the M20 shell, it gives you enough room to be able to set the rear wing at a decent height without worrying about having a huge gap down at the bottom here when you mount the shell. So that's the way I go about mounting my shells. And as I say, I know I've done a video about it before, but I think it's always a useful bit of kit to, or a useful process to practice. And enjoy. If you've liked the video, click the bell and like and subscribe. It'd be much appreciated. I'll see you all again next time.